Here's Brody Brazil.
Welcome to this video on what is about to be a deep dive into the state of Bay Area sports. We'll go team by team, including all of the ones listed here logo-wise on your screen. Yes, the San Jose Earthquakes are part of this, and so are the Sacramento Kings. Yeah, I get it. They're not in the immediate Bay Area. I probably shouldn't have referenced it that way. More of a Northern California thing, but they're relevant again, and they're not far from us, so I'm including Sac. Welcome to the party, State of Bay Area Sports. Now, wait a second. Why am I doing this now? A lot of you know I make A's and Sharks videos, and I pretty much leave it to that. But going on some of the recommendations I've been getting from you here on YouTube, you say, why not cover all the teams? Why not give some input on everything that's going on? That would be different. That would be cool. Let's see how it looks. So here I am. I'm also here because last night, literally, I had a dream to make this video. Like, I had the dream of this moment where I was about to make the video. So I'm living my dream right now in that sense. Like, I'm literally, not figuratively, I'm literally living my dream right now. Just wanted to let you know before we jump in. Okay, you ready for this? We start with the San Francisco 49ers, who are, in my opinion, the most interesting pro sports team right now in the Bay Area. And that's saying a lot because you have the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors like 60 miles up the road, and they're playing, and they're having some interesting parts of their season. But the 49ers, to me, are like a content machine. They're always captivating. There's a storyline. They mostly keep winning. As of right now, they've won 6 games in a row. And so maybe I'm a little bit hot on the 49ers bandwagon. Wait a second, though. I should explain. My name, Brody, is after the 49ers quarterback of decades ago, John Brody. So if you're going to criticize me of jumping on any bandwagons, not this one, not this time. It's my namesake, for goodness sakes. But yeah, the 49ers had a 3-4 start to this season. Since then, they've won 6 in a row. Oh, they're 9-4. And you look at what's left of their schedule for the rest of this season, there's some more winnable games. So they're definitely going to get to double digits. Let's see how many more they can stack on, what kind of momentum they can gain going into the playoffs. But there's also a little bit of reservation there, which I'll explain in just a second. And you kind of know what I'm getting at. A team that's already had its misfortunes, losing 2 quarterbacks, and still, thanks to Brock Purdy, in stride. Brock Purdy and others, by the way. We'll touch on that in just a second. But I mean, what are the chances? You have this whole conversation all summer long. Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo. What are you going to do? Oh, it's Trey Lance. Uh-oh, Trey Lance is hurt. Uh-oh, Trey Lance is out for the rest of the season. Now we need Jimmy Garoppolo. Thank goodness the 49ers were diligent in keeping him around for a multitude of reasons, but now they need him in an immediate role. Turns out, he's out for the rest of the season. So we'll get to Brock Purdy in just a second, but just kind of the feeling about this year, right? What a story this season would be if it pans out to a far length. I don't even know how far this team is capable of going, maybe all the way, but under the shadow of losing 2 starting quarterbacks like that with similar injuries and maybe even the criticism of you shouldn't have had them in those play-calling situations to get injured, but I digress. How about the acquisition of Christian McCaffrey, which in retrospect might have saved this team's season? An offensive weapon that's going to help out whoever is under center, right? Didn't get to play with Trey Lance. Obviously, Jimmy is out hurt, but now he's in there with Brock Purdy, and you can use him in a multitude of ways. You can throw him the football. You can hand it off to him. And the Christian McCaffrey trade, I want to go back to this, risky in a sense of what you were giving up, but also what even were you going to get? A potentially injury-prone player. Last year, it was the ankle that kept him out, I want to say, from November through the rest of the way. And even as I record this right now, dealing with some kind of knee injury that, yeah, lets him play, but maybe he can't fully do everything as he wants to or is supposed to. So it was a game-changing move by this team to really go for it back then when they did, how they acquired him, obviously a lot of family connections, the name, the history at Stanford as well. So a very regional, heartwarming story. But, oh yeah, an important player to add to your squad now, especially looking back. I don't think that's any stretch to say that that move saved this season and kept it going right now for the 49ers. But going back to Brock Purdy, you think about the 2022 draft, and it gets to pick 261, and he's not selected, and there's only one more choice left. And he, the quarterback from Iowa State, is sitting there. He's 262 and immediately gets that title, Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, first off, the fact that that's a thing, right? That's not on him. That's a long-standing title for anybody who's picked last, like in the NFL draft. To have that thrown on you, it's almost like all you have to do is respond to that at some point in your career, and then people laugh at the Mr. Irrelevant. They call you Mr. Relevant. And I think when you start your first game and beat Tom Brady, now again, small sample size, let's see what he's going to do and what he has to do the rest of this season. But that in the moment right there, and when you trounce Tom Brady and Tampa like they did, that right there is the moment where you're Mr. Relevant all of a sudden. So I just think this is such a storybook situation. And as much as nobody wanted him to have to be in this position or situation, especially the 49ers, there's like something special to this, something special in the air when you really sit down and think about what's happening. It's like a movie script. It really is. And then when Debo goes down this past weekend in the game, you're thinking, oh no, again? Are you serious? Like what is really going on here? And it's almost like the 49ers, as they see this season go and you have this winning record and things are still going along fine and you've taken hits here and there, you feel doomed but also destined. Like watch them overcome this. Their team defense, by the way, has been a huge part of overcoming things, which I'll elaborate on in just a second. But it is that catch-22, feeling doomed but also feeling like, well, none of this has stopped the team yet. They're still on this 6-game win streak. Where does that even end? Or does it even end the rest of the way in the remaining weeks? Going back to Debo, again, that's a player that now they say, as of today, is going to return by the end of the regular season. Fingers crossed that is actually the case. And you look at how he got hurt, the play calling, and how he's been used this year. 50 catches versus 37 rushes. There was the thought that there wouldn't be that many rushes and there'd be a lot more catches. But that's not how it's turned out this year. Again, going back to your key offensive players, and there are many of them, this is a big one. And I think when he comes back, you may want to think about using him differently and reworking those expectations to make sure you have him the rest of the season and hopefully in some playoff games. But going back to the 49ers defense, like a lot of football teams in a lot of seasons, the lack of credit is there because it's not the sexiest part of any football team or their game, but it's noticeable, right? When you pay attention to how a team got there, think about this. The 49ers defense allows 268 yards to the opponent on average per game. 268 yards, that's the top ranking in the National Football League. How about this? First downs. They've only allowed opponents to 214 first downs this year. That is also a number one ranking in the National Football League. And I point out Dre Greenlaw here. He had the interception of Tom Brady this past weekend. He leads the 49ers in tackles. So there's the defensive line, you could say, is, the key part of it, but somebody like Dre Greenlaw making tackles behind them, key part of this team. And the reason why they're here. And that's what makes me wonder. Quarterback is such an important position, like the goalie in hockey, like the pitcher in baseball. It's that primary performer position. But the 49ers are so loaded on defense. They're so loaded with offensive weapons. I'm not saying, do you need your quarterback? I'm saying, are we finding out that they're so well built around the quarterback position that all that person has to do is facilitate the playbook, facilitate the football, and they'll still be fine? That remains to be seen. Okay, so my prognosis on the 49ers, the rest of the way. Are you at least entertained? Are you not at least entertained? Can't even read my own writing here. Like this season, I get it. It's not optimal. You didn't want to lose quarterbacks. You're hoping that this good regular season can pan out into a good finish, ultimately winning some playoff games and the whole deal here. But like, football fans seem to love drama. They love conversation. They love storylines. Holy moly, if you're on the 49ers this season, has provided that. So entertainment value, completely high for this team this season. But I think ultimately, right, you're in this business to win games, to win a Super Bowl. And the franchise has no doubt gone in the right direction here in the Kyle Shanahan era. First 2 years, acclimation process, building what you want. 2019 goes to the Super Bowl. 2020 was a bust season in a lot of different ways. It was a bust year for a lot of us. And then back to the NFC Championship game last year. We'll see where they go this year. And that's kind of the last thing I'll leave it with here. Eventually, right, you're building towards something. You have this good group of players, and maybe you add to it from this season to the next. At some point, you want to get over the hump, right? You want to win the Super Bowl game when you get there. You want to win the NFC Championship game to get you back to another Super Bowl. At some point, you hope for this group that they can get everything together and that they can get over that hump. And a big deal, even next year, will just be getting Trey Lance back in there and hopefully healthy for a full regular season and beyond. So that's my 49ers prognosis. That is my state of the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, let's move on. The Oakland A's. Now we're closer to home. Now we're talking to a lot of the subscribers here on this channel. State of the Oakland A's as we speak here in December 2022. Now, they're not going to play a baseball game for a while, but I also realize as I do this here, the year's not over. I don't expect a lot of changes. I think they might be done for this calendar year and even into January of 23 probably. But just looking back of where this baseball team stands, 102 losses here in 2022, the second worst record in Oakland franchise history. Only in 1979 did they lose more games. Those are the only 2 years, 79 and 22, where they lost triple-digit amount of games. So when people say, hey, Brody, was this the worst A season you've covered? Like, you've done a lot of these. Yes, actually, it's the worst season of my life. I was born in 81. I didn't see the 79 season. So to kind of realize that, but to also understand that none of that really comes as a huge surprise. Some people will say, yeah, this record was self-inflicted. Yes, I mean, the changes they made, the direction that they chose to go in, as soon as the lockout ended back in March, a lot of trades, your major players from Bassett to Manaea to Frankie Montas to Chapman and Olsen. Sorry, I'm trying to run through the night. I was trying to do it in order. Forget that. You know all the names. You know how it played out. But the whole thing here is just a matter of a team with different expectations and a different bar and a different plan, right? So none of that was terribly surprising. But now we're looking at a pipeline of prospects and young players that's been rebuilt, and there is some strength there, and there's some excitement there. We've already seen some of the call-ups in their very initial big league stages. But the question is, what's going to pan out? More like, who is going to pan out and when? And at what point do you look back on all of these trades and transactions and maneuvers and eventually draft picks and say, well, some of this or all of this or most of this paid off. The A's have done this, and that's my last point here. The A's and the fans should have confidence in at least one thing: repetition. They've done this before. They've done this well. They do this surprisingly well. They do this maybe even frustratingly well. Right? They know how to regenerate. They know how to come back in a couple years and to everybody else's in the league's frustration, like, how do they keep doing this? How do they find the right players? How do they keep rebuilding a team after they tore it down a couple years ago? So that is the one thing you can say about the Oakland A's. For any criticism, there's also this compliment. They know how to find the right people. They know how to bring them up and build a team the right way. So all that's part of the big picture. There's also this: on the field versus off the field versus like actually keeping your field in Oakland, securing a new home for the Oakland A's. I've said this before. It outweighs anything this baseball team does on the diamond next year in 2023. Commissioner's already said, big year. I think we recognize that. There's a new city council, a couple new council members, I should say. Brand new mayor, Shang Tao, is the mayor-elect as I record this. We've had conversations, that interview, by the way, here on my channel, but a little bit of uncertainty with this new Oakland government. Libby Schaaf, former mayor of 8 years, she was very close, got very close to the A's in terms of building trust and getting the conversation going, getting the wheels spinning between the baseball team and the city. And now we've got to here where there is an agreement to be had still for both sides. And there is a vote, hopefully, a binding vote, hopefully, that ultimately happens by the city council. But we don't know, right, with 2 new city council members and a new mayor, what does this look like? Do the negotiations change? Does the voting favor the project? We don't exactly know what comes next there, but hopefully soon that's what we find out. At the same point here, we knew it's parallel paths between Oakland and Las Vegas, although it has been oddly quiet on the Las Vegas front. I think a lot of people on the Oakland side of this, including myself as a proponent of the Howard Terminal Ballpark that the A's have worked so hard on, you're just waiting to hear what is this project up against maybe somewhere else. And there just, to this point, has not been anything that instantly is concerning or worrying, and those things might come. But at this point, it's more about how can the A's in Oakland get this agreement? How can they move forward? How can they get that gap of infrastructure money, right, that they need to build a ballpark at Howard Terminal? How can they narrow that down to ultimately get this stadium to be a reality? So all the big picture stuff, right, on the field, but more importantly off the field, and it brings us back to the prognosis for the 2023 Oakland A's. In my opinion, they're going to have a better record like from opening day. Like there's no question about it. More experienced players. This group will not have just gone through the transition of tearing everything down. And quite honestly, I don't expect a lot of change or transition even remaining, like in terms of trading away more players. No disrespect to the entire group, but I mean, are we talking like Cole Irvin, Tony Kemp, Ramon Laureano? Only a couple players who would be trade pieces left for the Oakland A's. So they're retooling, they're rebuilding. James Caprillion. I don't mean to omit anybody, by the way, but the point being here is that the change and the shock factor is just not going to happen much anymore. Now, at some point, you're going to hit that spot where there's no more demolition. It's all about reconstruction. And I think the A's are just about at that point. And so the last thing I want to leave it with here on the A's and my state of their franchise, 2023, it just has to be a year where the healing begins. And I mean like the healing on the field, like the team doesn't lose 100 games and you start to see those upward trends. And hopefully the healing of things moving forward in Oakland to the point where there's a binding agreement, there's a vote, there are some certainties. The name on the front of that jersey, is going to stay Oakland. And that alone is going to bring such a calming influence over this fan base, which, yeah, of course, has been on edge, right? There was like a couple years of 97 win seasons and trying to win. And then all of a sudden, everybody traded away. And in the background of all that is the team staying or going somewhere else. So it's been a turmoil-filled seasons, a couple seasons for the A's. And so, yeah, there's been a lot going on. It's been busy. But if we can get to a calm, healing season for this team and the fans, I think it's going to go a long way. So that's my state of the Oakland A's right here in December of 2022. Okay, what's next? Oh, we're doing like that, huh? We're going straight from the A's to the Giants. Now, I realize a lot of you are just looking at the screen right now, seeing a Giants logo and seeing Brody Brazil, and you're flipping out. You're freaking out. Like, this doesn't work. These two things don't belong together. Is this guy going to just sit there and talk bad about these guys? No. This is the state of all the Bay Area teams. It's the series. I'm genuinely, I live here. I'm interested. I have tons of friends that love the Giants. I know people that work for the Giants. Like, yeah, no hard feelings. Come on, let's get past the petty stuff. No, I'm here to be serious in my state of the San Francisco Giants. And again, I'm just being honest here, but it's quite the contrast to go from 107 wins to last year 81 and 81. And I have to hand it to Giants fans, because even down the stretch of last year, all this conversation of, well, we could find a way into the wild card, we could get into the playoffs, and like they never said die until it was mathematically impossible. So I do give the fans credit for being eternally optimistic. But from 107 wins, like in that year, in 2021, so many things went right. And it was Buster's last season, and it just, things clicked for them. Their pitching was phenomenal. To kind of come down to earth this last year, it raises a lot of unfortunate, realistic questions. You know, did you overperform in one year? What's the trend? What's the direction of this team? And how many players can you keep? You know, the Cuetos and the Rodons and all that stuff. Times change, right? Like you don't get to keep your team and necessarily always have a second chance at it. And I just want to say, speaking of the last couple weeks here, specifically the last week, missing out on the addition of Aaron Judge to your team, not the worst thing in the world. I saw so much pessimism on social media. I saw so much like angst, how the Giants are always the bridesmaids or whatever the terminology is, and they didn't get Harper and they didn't get Ohtani, and they keep going after all these players, and they try and land the biggest fish and they never do. Okay. Like, hold your horses for just a second here. It doesn't always work that way. We know that you are an attractive franchise. You've had your share of winning in the last decade. You've got a great city and a great ballpark, and you're willing to spend, and there's a lot of upside. I get it. I totally get it. But if you had gone into the long-term deal with Aaron Judge, how does that look in year 6 and 7 and 8? He's 31 right now. I mean, guy's getting a contract till he's basically 40 years old. Did you really want to get into this? And were you well built enough to support an Aaron Judge? Like, he is the centerpiece. He would be your backbone. Can you build, or do you have enough money and resources to build around Aaron Judge? I'm just saying, and the contract and the amount and everything would be criticized. He would have to play up to like the level he did last year, seemingly every single year. And I'm not wishing him ill, and I'm not wishing the Yankees frustrations in all of this. But this is a different situation for the Giants had they actually landed this than the Yankees in keeping him. So I'm here to talk Giants fans down a little bit and saying, I don't think you see it, but I see it from the outside. You are upset about Aaron Judge. You got emotionally invested. You saw the John Heyman tweet when Arson Judge. This is so funny. I mean, the misspelling was so ridiculous. But I get it. You got into it and it didn't work. But trust me on this one. You're better off in the long run, in the very long run, not going that direction. You want to build a team. And I get to the next point here. You have a platform, the ballpark, the money that you can spend, a little bit of the history. Farhan, in his experience as a GM in building teams from the ground up with some thought and with some background and with some strategy, you just need the content now for which is the team, right? You've got all these things going on which make you a great location to excel. Now you just need the team to go along with it. But I do want to say, thinking about the team, what I think often is a misstep here by the Giants fans and fan base is that the realization hasn't kicked in that 2012, 2010, 12, and 14 were more than 10 years ago now. In fact, 2014 pretty soon is going to be 10 years removed. And there is some feeling like there's still some leftover magic, or that you're still on that run, or we're on that extended run and we just hit a bad streak for a while. I get it. Some of you say, I don't feel that way. What are you talking about? I'm just saying I've observed enough sentiment in that direction, and I want to help those people who still are feeling tied to that. That was last decade, literally and figuratively. Okay, more on the big picture. If you're the Giants, I've said you have the platform, you've got the right, and you're building like Mitch Haniger and Sean Manaea, great additions. Those are the kinds of directions that this team needs to go. Build a team. Don't just build an Aaron Judge and some surrounding pieces. Build an absolute team. That's what 2010 and 12 and 14 were, right? There was the star players, and obviously with Bumgarner and Buster and like Marco Scutaro was one of your heroes. Was he Aaron Judge? Like, think about that for just a second. Think about all of the Travis Ishikawas, like all those names that jumped in there and stepped up. They always weren't the Aaron Judges. But I skipped over the NL West. I mean, look, it is not enviable at all to be in the same division as the Dodgers and Padres right now. You got to be kidding me, right? What they're doing, what they're spending on, how they're spending. So I'm just saying you don't necessarily have to be a copycat in how they're trying to put their baseball team together. I also want to point out here, what has been a very impressive backbone of this team for a long time. It's hard to believe Brandon Crawford has 12 years of Major League Baseball under his belt. He's only played with the Giants. He's only played defensively as a shortstop, 1,561 games as I record this right now. So you still have him. There is something left there. Still playing some of his better baseball, to be quite honest with you. I hope Giants fans realize how fortunate they are to have him as a huge piece. Okay, so the prognosis on the Giants. They could have a winning record next year. They could take some steps. I mean, they were 500 this last year. So, yeah, I could see improvement, no doubt. But where is that going to get you? Probably not winning the division based on who else is in it. A wild card spot, which is a tough way to exist in the playoffs, right? But you also have to be good in your division, right? To even have a wild, you're going to play the Dodgers and Padres a lot and other difficult teams a lot. So it's going to probably count on or rely on counting on a wild card spot. I already said this. Yeah, you don't have to spend like the Padres and Dodgers to win the division. Giants fans, look, I know you don't want to hear this from the A's guy, but look how the Oakland A's do it, right? I mean, in their division, and even going back all the years, like Texas, they've always spent a ton on big names. And Seattle here and there would, and the Angels have, like the Angels, look at them. Trout and Ohtani, Trout for a bunch of years, Ohtani for now, quite a few, enough. Trout's been to one playoff series, and he got swept in it by the Royals in 2014, never won a playoff game. So you can do this, Giants. You just need to go a different direction than what the other teams are doing. And honestly, my last point I'll leave it with here, a prognosis for the Giants, what they're doing, it could work out. But it might take a while. It might take a few more years than Giants fans want. Okay. The San Jose Sharks. Let's do a little state of the San Jose Sharks. Now, I should hopefully have some expertise in this area, seeing as I host their pre- and post-game shows, and I watch every game, and I've been dialed in with this team for the last 13, 14 years working, and all of their years. Well, actually, I take it back. First two, I was young. 91, 92, I was, 10 and 11 and 12, something like that. So 93, when they moved into the tank, I got to go to my first game, December of 93, by the way. Holy smokes, is that we're coming up on a big milestone anniversary of that. But I digress. Let's jump into the state of the Sharks here. Big picture is that looming playoff rut. When you don't make it 3 years in a row, like they haven't now, that's a big deal. It's the first time in franchise history that they've ever been in this spot. And that's, we've been not jaded, but we've been treated. We've been treated to a team that has those types of expectations. There's a lot of groups across professional sports, baseball, basketball, football. They don't make the playoffs for 4, 5, 6, 7. Look at the Sacramento Kings. 16 years they've not seen the NBA's postseason. Now, that's the longest active streak in pro sports, but changes are in place. And these types of things, here we are 30 plus years in. So 3 years in a row, in the big scheme of things, if you're not the Sharks, it's not a big deal. But because we are talking about the Sharks, it is a big deal. Changes are in place. hockey operations staff that looks dramatically different, and no disrespect to the prior regime. They did it so well for so long. You feel like the franchise may be paying the price of that success a little bit right now. New head coach, new general manager, assistant general manager, scouts top and down, and a team and an ownership that like really cares about getting back and getting right again. So yeah, frustration in what's happened, but I think trust in the fact that the right people are at the helm and will get you back there. They are passionate about this as you are too. I think the Sharks this year, one commonality, if I could sum up the way they've played, up to the level of some teams and down to the level of other teams. Usually up to the level of better teams that come in, elite teams, and they play them close. And even if they lose by a goal or maybe even two, or they win the game, and you're thinking, wow, the Sharks, that was an impressive showing. They really hung with the, you name it, New York Rangers, Toronto Maple Leafs, teams that are really good that they've beat this year. But then they've played down to the level of opponents where you're thinking, how did you let Ottawa hand it to you like that? Like they did recently. So I think inconsistency, frustration in that regard, but let's be honest, that's something that usually goes with being a team that's not put together how you want it. And I think we see that with the Sharks. They're also not searching for what's going to just get them right and get them through this year. I respect it. This is a franchise that's searching for long-term fixes here. In a sense, when you look at the prospects they have right now, several miles away with the San Jose Barracuda, they've chosen to keep them there and not bring them up. Bringing them up might be a short-term fix, but keeping them together might be a better long-term solution for sustained success for the Bordelots and Eklunds and Coes and Merkleys and beyond. So I get it. I like what they're doing. I like the fact that they're doing things here. They're doing something. And by the way, that Barracuda group, it is a team to keep your eye on. We're fortunate that they play so close, that a lot of their games are now streamed and televised, so you can check them out easy, and the stats are right there. You can keep tabs. I mean, you should honestly go see them in person to literally keep tabs on them. But it's the first time in a long time that the Sharks have looked ahead as much as they're witnessing the present. They're also looking ahead to see what this next group can hopefully do for them. So the Barracuda are more exciting right now than they've been in a while, but they're more relevant right now than they've been in quite some time, even going back to when they played out in Worcester. They were the Worcester Sharks. A little bit of Timo Meier watch right now. Something's got to give before the trade deadline. What will free agency look like for him? How will this go with the Sharks? An offer? What else might be out there for him? I just think if you're San Jose, you got to handle this one of two ways. You have to know that you're going to sign him if it's after the deadline, if you're keeping him, or maybe you trade him before that. And Timo, if you see this, you know how much I like you. I hate doing that. I hate talking about you like this. But it's one of those situations where I think he recognizes it. Something has to happen here. The Sharks have to get their value out of this situation somehow. The value of keeping him would be my preference. But the value of a return and a trade situation, if you're not going to keep him, then you at least have to get that. But I also want to say what makes this such a complicated situation for Timo and everybody else is that there is not currently a lot of cap space right now. It's a hard cap in the NHL, and I don't know how much it'll even go up from this year to the next year after that. I feel like it had a bigger push maybe like 5-6 years ago. In recent years, it stayed a little bit more flat. So I don't know what the cap space for the Sharks, and we're only talking a couple million if it does go up, but they're already pretty much slammed at the top of that cap anyway. So how do they create flexibility for options and decisions and moving forward? I really don't know. That's definitely part of the big picture, though. So the prognosis for the Sharks goes like this. They have some really good carryover pieces from what I call like the last era or the last push of the team. Basically like 2019, the Carlsons, the Coutures, Vlasic's. There are a lot of players that have persisted from the old group, right? And let's just say the Pete DeBoer era. So even before Bob Bugner, but the DeBoer era, basically. But this group, it could use the blood and the life of a couple new centerpieces. Whether those are centerpieces that you bring up through your system or you acquire some other way, it just does feel like that. And granted, like, we're just getting started with the Mike Grier tenure as GM, so we'll see what he does and how he does it. He's got some tight corners to navigate around at this point, but this is a franchise, I think, that could use, some new centerpieces. Like, we were so fortunate. Think about this. Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau. And when Danny Heatley came in, and Dan Boyle came in, and Rob Blake came in, and it was, one after the next. And Joe Pavelski turned out to be who he was, and people loved Ryan Clough. But you need more centerpieces like that. You need to get back to having some of those for the future. I go back to patience and process. It's hard to be patient, right? When this team has done what they've done and they've always been a playoff contender, having patience is difficult, but doing this process the right way, not rushing it, not trying to temporarily have one good season and then revert to struggles again. Nobody wants that. You got to build for, another 11-year run of postseason appearances. And then let me just point this out. I don't know the odds of the Sharks getting a really good pick. Number one, I would never say to aim for that specifically. If it happens organically, great. Even if you get a high pick, and the Sharks, depending on where they finish and the lottery, how it goes, it's supposed to be a really good 2023 draft class. Now, what does that mean? That player may not even be around until 25 or 6, but you got to keep that pipeline flowing if you're the Sharks. So let's hope that this playoff rut of 3 years doesn't get too many numbers higher than that. Okay, who's next here? Oh, we just went purple. How about the state of the Sacramento Kings? Now, let me just say this for clarification. I grew up in the Bay Area, went to tons of Warriors games. Run TMC was my jam, not to mention all the other surrounding players. The Sarunas Marshalloneses, the Billy Owenses, the Chris Gatlings, Sprewell for spurts. John Starks. Remember when John Starks was a Warrior? Anyway, Kings fans, you don't want to watch this part. So I'm just saying, I've always loved the Warriors, but I've never disliked the Sacramento Kings. Nothing but respect for the fact that they have a totally different situation, smaller market, right up 80. You could go there from the Bay Area. Like, it's not, if you kind of want to see like an NBA road game or see the Warriors play on the road, literally it's a small short commute to get to. And I'm so sad that Arco Arena doesn't exist. I mean, I'm thrilled that Golden One Center was built, where it was built, when it was built to save the team. But there was something about Arco. Like, it really was a barn, the wood floors, and you could stop and make a lot of loud noise, and how loud it got there. And all the eras of teams, and just, oh my goodness. Early 2000s, it was special. Anyway, state of the Sacramento Kings right now. And they've had an interesting season. They've had some changes with the head coach, but we got to begin with this. Let's light the beam on this team. How cool is that? They've made it their thing on nights where they win. As soon as they win, from the top of Golden One Center in downtown Sacramento, they light that big purple beam, shoots straight up in the sky. And in a place like Sacramento, that works. Like here in the Bay Area, that doesn't really work. All the hills, and you couldn't see the beam from 5 miles away because, there's a small hill or a big mountain in your way. But in Sacramento, where you can see for miles, like I bet you on a really clear night, could you see it from Stockton? That might be too far. Could you see it from up in the foothills? Like in Rockland, could you see that beam? I'd be interested to know. Let me know, by the way, in the comments, if you live like farther away from downtown Sacramento and you can see that. I don't know, but on TV, it looks great. Anyway, what a cool thing. And it signifies the time that they're having and the season that they're having and the start that they're off to. Winning record for the first time in a while. went on the 7-game win streak after losing their first 4 games of this season. And Mike Brown, their new head coach, came in saying that he was going to change things up. They've always been a quick, talented, fast break, full court team. Let's slow things down. We'll work on our half court attack and offense and make that kind of our strong point. And they have. And they've been scoring a ton of points. They average 118 points per game, which is good, but really important and difficult. And I'll explain that in just a second. Their star point guard, De'Aaron Fox, draft pick from 5 years ago now. I'm losing track. We just found out, though, that he's been playing hurt. He has a bruised right foot, which happened in a November 5th game against Orlando. Coincidentally, a game where he hit the buzzer-beating game-winning three-pointer from half court. But in that game, it came with some sacrifice as he's been playing hurt for about a month. Now, the Kings have sustained. They've done okay. I hope that he's revealing this because he's mostly better or is close to that, and he can hang in there. But what the Kings have done is they've captivated people. They've caught their attention, and they are a thing. They are no longer under the radar. And as I mentioned in this look at all of the Bay Area teams, and I know they're Northern California, Sacramento is its own thing, but right now the Sacramento Kings have the longest active playoff drought across all pro sports teams of every league, 16 years. They've been on the outside looking in. They need this season to work out. And I'll elaborate more on that in just a second too. But it's weird to see the Kings all of a sudden as not a team that's going to trade their players. The Kings are in the rumor mill because they're going to add. They are buyers now. When was the last time we said that? Was Vlade still posting up back then, trying to get it across to C. Webb back? Like literally? And Peja was trying to shoot as many three-pointers as possible. Like it has been that long. So the Sacramento Kings are looking to add to their team, and I love this for them. I absolutely do. But here's one more big picture thought and a little bit of a concern. I mentioned before that they score a ton of points. In fact, Sacramento Kings, on average, score the second most points per night in the NBA at 118. Here's the problem. They also allow 115 on average. So they win by average by 3 points per night, 118 to 115. But that 115 points allowed per game is 20th in the NBA. Bottom half for sure. You're down there with a lot of teams that don't win a lot of games. They don't outscore their defensive problems. So any reason to worry in the long term, like when hopefully they get to the playoffs, if defense is really important, can they lock down? Are they just not built that way? Are they not capable of it? Does it not suit their style or their personnel? That's something that I hope for the Sacramento Kings improves this year as it goes is their defense. My prognosis on Sacramento is this. Making the playoffs alone would generate so much optimism for this team and this community, something they haven't seen in 16 years now and counting. Like that streak can literally have a driver's license. It's that old. And by the way, the team that held it longer, that just handed it over to the Kings, it was baseball's Seattle Mariners. They went 21 years without making the playoffs. Went from 2001, I think they won like 115 games that year, something like that, to not making it for the next 21 years. Their streak could have a drink legally. And they just got in the playoffs. So hopefully that's part of this story for the Kings, that they own this stupid streak for 1 year and then they don't even own it anymore. That would be great. But I really do feel like that's all Sacramento needs, is to see their team in a playoff series. Now, I hope it doesn't end there for them. That's an ultimate letdown, and you don't want to go all that way just for that. Who would want that? Not me. But I really hope that is how their season, their last game of the season is in some kind of playoff series. That's all that matters to me. And I think, again, it's that situation where, going into next summer, this upcoming summer, that is what would satisfy Kings fans, to know that they finally got back and they're still building in the right direction. And reinforcements right now, as I said before, it's not just with the little Fox injury, but it's the entire team. I'm not saying that they're fragile by any means, like in terms of injury or in terms of depth, but reinforcements for this group, I feel like, are more of a necessity than a luxury, right? A lot of teams, if you're looking at them, you say, well, we could add this. It would only make us better. I feel like the Kings, they need that as a necessity more than they need that as, oh, it would be nice to have this or that. But obviously a defensive player would be special, wouldn't it? So that's my state of the Sacramento Kings here in December of 2022. All right, what's next? I don't even remember. Oh, little soccer. State of the San Jose Earthquakes. I love this. I'm happy about this. And for those of you who thought that I would not include them in this series, shame on you. Soccer needs the love and the attention. And I can't believe it's a sport that we all grow up playing here in Northern California. And then for whatever reason, it just doesn't translate into us as adults, like this being our number one priority in life. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird dynamic. I wish every young soccer player retained that passion for the game, the beautiful game, the rest of their lives, and obviously passed it on. Okay, but that's a side story. State of the San Jose Earthquakes, last year for them was rough. 7 matches in, their head coach, Matias Almeida, dismissed by the team after a pretty mediocre start, but he was around for a couple years. When he became their head coach, that was a big deal. He got a group of players to buy in. It seemed like they were gaining traction, but then they ultimately could never take multiple steps forward. So they had an interim head coach the rest of last year. Luchi Gonzalez just took over. Well, he will take over, I should say, but he just finished coaching with the U.S. men's national team at the World Cup 2022. So it's going to be interesting to see what another head coach brings. And by the way, we'll discuss how many times that carousel has turned around in just a second. But going back to the Quakes, I mean, remember 2012? They were the Goonies? The Goonies never die, and they won all those games late, and it was a magical season. They were a really good team back then, one of the best in MLS. But that was their last dominant season, and in fact, it was one of their last successful seasons, and that's now 10 years removed. They did make the playoffs in 2017, didn't have a great record, to be honest, and in 2020, it was the paused season that returned with MLS is back, or whatever they called it, down in Florida. So I don't even know that I count that, but it just goes to show you how they, as a franchise, have hit a rut. And that's so unfortunate because they have beautiful PayPal Park now. They're just well more established as a franchise. The experience is such. I wish they had that 2012 team, or even some resemblance of it, nowadays in their current setup. And I think that would go a long way for kind of their status and attention here in the Bay Area. So for the Quakes, 9 head coaches in the last 10 years, and they're about to have 10 in 11 years. I just feel like with the whole coaching thing, your players are obviously the ones on the pitch. They get the job done or not, but having some consistency at the very top and as it relates to messages and strategies, no team in any sport does well when there's that volume of turnover at the very top. So without getting too far into the specifics of the X's and O's and strategy, to change things at the top that many times, after so much stability, and Frank Yallop was there for how many years? And that's kind of when the Quakes were really in their stride. And ever since then, they've just had a lot of turnover. Other thing I want to talk about is the Quakes scoring. Last year, they scored 46 goals in 34 matches. So about 1 and change per game. And they ended up with a -8 differential, right? The relationship of goals for and goals allowed. But Jeremy Ebobisse scored 17 times. That's 17 of the team's 46. That's a little uneven and imbalanced and asymmetrical, and it's almost half the team's goals, but you easily get to that spot when you add in Christian Espinoza's 7 goals, right? That gets you to more than half of 46. So moving forward, right, they weren't a bad defensive team. They just had issues scoring consistently, having multiple scoring threats and depth last year. It's the team number, but it's a lot of individual numbers you'd like to see go differently and go up. Prognosis for the Quakes in 2023 and beyond. And we did just see the first post-Chris Wondolowski season. We're now well past the Chris Wondolowski era. So what and who is next? And you look at who was the team's leading scorer for pretty much all of his seasons. Like, it was Wando. I think there's 2 seasons maybe of all of his years that he was not the leading scorer. Look, and it's a team game too, but you do need somebody to lean on. And I'm interested to know for the Quakes, who is that next player? Have they just signed him? Is that person a year away? Will we see them anytime soon? So I look forward to who is the next like face and foundation of this franchise. There's also this, and I said before that I led off with the popularity of the Quakes. In other markets with MLS, their teams have just rocketed, like from Atlanta, and I think Nashville's had great attendance, if I'm correct on that. But I know that Portland and Seattle out here on the West Coast have. And the Quakes somehow, with a beautiful new stadium and the pitch, 26th out of 28 MLS teams in attendance. And I don't necessarily understand it. Again, the geography, our region, everything that makes us in the Bay Area, and we can't support this team a little bit better, like they do in Atlanta, like they do in Portland, like they do, again, in Seattle. It doesn't make any sense. And maybe it's success. Maybe that's a huge part of it. Maybe you get some more wins in there and you draw some more eyeballs, or a certain player that's a magnet for attention. I don't know the answer, but I would love to see the Quakes have a more packed and filled environment at PayPal Park. And then obviously too, this is a group and a team that's moving on from a prior era. Tommy Thompson and Chase Salinas had both been around for a very long time. Both of them will not be on the team. Salinas retiring, and the Quakes choosing not to pick up the option on Tommy's contract. So for the Quakes, look, let me just pitch you like this. It'd be a good time to get in. If you don't want to be accused of being a bandwagon fan, jump in right now. Jump in while this group is hopefully about to start the upward trend. I hope that for them, and I hope to see you along on the ride as we witness that. Okay, who do we have here next? Oh, is this the last team? How about State of the Golden State Warriors? State of the Golden State. I love making Warriors videos. I don't do it very often, but here we are. It's December of 2022. Yeah, I realize there's a lot of month left before 2023. There's like half a month, like 1/24 of the calendar year. But the holidays are coming. We're about to get busy. I won't get around to making this video. I'm doing this here and now, halfway through December 2022. What is the state of the Golden State Warriors? It certainly is interesting, the start that they've got off to. Went on a little bit of a losing skid, lost 5 in a row. That road trip between Charlotte, Detroit, Miami, Orlando, and then the Pelicans. I couldn't believe that happened. But the big picture goes like this. Overall, the change in turnover in the years and the arena that they play in and all the surrounding cast members, where are the Warriors without their big three? Without Steph, without Draymond, without Clay, it's clear what has happened here. Those three have been the constant. Obviously, the way the NBA works, you have to surround your star players with a good supporting cast. It's been different names and faces over the years, but without those three, where would the team be this year? The minutes those three still play, the contributions those three make, and everything that they've been through. It becomes more impressive the longer they persist. But again, the eye-catching losses this season for the Warriors, like losing, I think they lost to the Jazz, they lost to the Mavs, 500-ish teams. That's just not what the Warriors have done in recent times. And I know they had a struggle-filled year or two without Klay Thompson, and they weren't the same team. But and even coming back and rebuilding was not a guarantee. It was not a guarantee that when the band got back together, they'd still be able to play the same music. Oh, until they did. Until they won the NBA title last year and beat Boston. But a couple eye-catching losses where you're These are the Warriors? These are who they're losing to? Wait, aren't they back? Didn't they just win an NBA title? Another Larry O'Brien trophy? But when you really think about it, this group is so experienced. They've been through so much. They still have so much leadership. and poise and know-how, and they know when to pace and conserve and push and all that stuff. Really? If they're like 500 in January at some point, isn't that going to be okay? Now, I don't want them to have to make some ridiculous push like down the stretch, because that might burn them out too. You know what I mean? It might cost you to get to the playoffs. It might cost you a run in the playoffs. You know that second season is grueling and daunting. But I'm just saying, if it comes to how do you get to the playoffs, yeah, hang around till January, make your push. The Warriors are fully capable of doing that. And I also wonder, like Andre Iguodala with the hip injury, right? We haven't seen him, and there apparently was no timetable for the longest time. Now, in recent weeks, we've heard Steve Kerr say that Andre has been practicing scrimmaging, not to full strength yet, but a second half return in the season is likely for him. I say, if you can get a 100% Andre and he can do things for you, why wouldn't he be a spark in the spring months? Don't even rush it. Don't even make it an all-star game thing. Like, literally bring him back March 1st, right? Give him all the time he needs to be right. And the other thing I want to point out here with the Warriors is that, yeah, you've got your big three, but you also have that surrounding cast of Wiggins, Poole, and Looney with, important minutes that they're playing. But are you also kind of hopefully counting on a next wave and a next phase of players to get you through the hardest of times, the later half of the schedule, the Moody's, the Kumingas, the Wisemans, and obviously Wiseman's had a journey of his own this year, Santa Cruz included. So how can you get all those surrounding cast members to help that big three, that core three out, especially as they get older? Steph Curry's 34. 34 in prime shape, like doesn't look like he's missed too many beats, but he's 34, about to be 35. Draymond, 32, about to be 33. Same thing with Klay Thompson, on the verge of 33. And so that brings me to the prognosis for the Golden State Warriors in the rest of this season. They could do one of two things, and they're opposite, completely opposite, but neither would really surprise me. Like, they could win another NBA title. I'd say, yeah, I called it. I called it in December of 2022. Or they could also miss the playoffs because the team they are and, the way they've been, a little above 500, but nothing spectacular and surprisingly struggling. That could continue. That could magnify in the second half. I don't know. That could be the trend of the entire year. But neither one would be really surprising. And that's odd, right? Usually in sports, you have a read on a team. You've got an instinct on direction. I honestly don't know. I really don't have a great grasp on that. But again, it's that type of season for them. I do want to say the last thing here about the Warriors prognosis-wise is that their next few years, they have to be centered on transition. The Steph era, and no disrespect to Draymond or Klay, but Steph Curry has changed the game of basketball. Steph Curry has changed the Warriors as a franchise. Not to say they had a regrettable history at all by any means, but like, he has put a totally different coat of paint on this team. Honestly, it's been impressive. But we understand that the next 4 years are probably not going to look like the last 4 years or even the 4 years prior to that. That's got to be a realization that this team has to prepare for what's ahead immediately and to start preparing for it right now. And that's why I mentioned those cast members before. Your main characters right now, they've got some good basketball left, but they don't have a lot of that left, at least as long as we've known them, right? In the bigger picture, they don't have another 10 years at this. So hopefully they can contribute and end on a storybook note. So that's my state of the Warriors here in late 2022. Which brings me back, to the very beginning. We did it. How long have I been going here? Oh my gosh. Like an hour, basically? Talking to myself for an hour, but that's it. That's the state of Bay Area sports. The 49ers, the Quakes, the A's, the Sharks, the Giants, the Warriors, and Sacramento's Kings. Yeah, I know, not the Bay Area. I'll say it again, clarify. But hopefully you enjoyed this. I had a good time putting all this together, these thoughts, and it's something that I don't do often enough, maybe, is to talk about all the teams. So maybe I'll do more of this. Let me know if you like this, if you hung on to this. Thoughts and comments, put them down there below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thumbs up on this video if you were entertained. See you next time.